Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Avenged Sevenfold entitled Life Is But a Dream. This is the first full-length studio album in just about 7 years, and the 8th full-length studio album overall from these American heavy metal, metalcore juggernauts, who you probably already know about on some level. They've sold over 8 million records. They've been nominated for a few Grammy Awards here and there. They've had original songs featured in popular video game franchises like Call of Duty Black Ops. With this in mind, it is very fair to assume that you are at the very least aware of Life Is But a Dream, and at the very most highly anticipating this album's release to the general public. You very likely have strong opinions on the promo singles We Love You and Nobody. You very likely have shared your very strong opinions with me and have told me how terrible and stupid and evil and heartless and ridiculous I am for daring to criticize those songs. A lot of people are probably expecting that I'm going to tear this album a brand new asshole because of those song review YouTube shorts, and I'm not going to lie, I thought the same thing as well. Like, I went into this fully expecting to hate it, fully expecting that it would be one of my least favorite albums of 2023, fully expecting that it would be Avenged Sevenfold's worst record to date, maybe even worse than Hail to the King. But straight up, at no point throughout this process did any of those thoughts ever actually, seriously, unironically occur to me. Is it a perfect record that I'm going to love and listen to until the very end of time itself? Absolutely not. But credit where it's due. It's sharp, it's ambitious, it's imaginative, it's well made, and just overall a much better experience than what I was anticipating. While some of the usual tropes and techniques we associate with Avenged Sevenfold remain intact on this record, this is without question their weirdest and their most experimental record to date. Conceptually, the album is very broad, abstract, introspective, existentialist, drawing heavy inspiration from the works of Albert Camus. Lyrically, it deals with everything from artificial reality to the meaning of life to ego, greed, anxiety, and death. These guys have talked at length about how a wide variety of music influences both in and outside of metal, and also psychedelic drugs, have helped to inform and influence and shape and mold the sound and the feel and the vibe of Life Is But a Dream. If it sounds like I'm describing a clusterfuck, it's because I kind of am. I mean, this definitely comes close to like Donda and Chinese democracy levels of nonsensical, pretentious, clusterfuckian bullshit. But I will still say ultimately the good outweighs the bad, and this record succeeds more often than it falls flat on its face. Opening number Game Over, for instance, strikes a nice balance between this very surreal and over-the-top punky thrash brutality and madness, complete with ripping Slayer-esque guitar solos and some intentionally monotonous yet manic vocal spats, and some more gentle acoustic guitar-driven, almost prog rock sections, complete with flute and some very natural, rustic, organic atmospheres. It kind of feels like something that might have been ripped from, like, very early Genesis, or even something like, you know, a softer piece from Led Zeppelin like Stairway to Heaven. Then there's Mattel, which sports bulldozing riffs, elaborate piano sections, a surprisingly technical, almost Gojira-esque breakdown, also some jazzy sprawls and melancholic vocals. It almost kind of feels like if mid-2000s Muse tried to write a modern-day Slipknot song. The very appropriately titled Cosmic takes us on a spacey adventure filled with all kinds of twists and turns before eventually turning into kind of a power ballad with some more uplifting and cathartic melodies and some synthesized vocal textures and harmonies reminiscent of Cynic. Then there's G, which is hands down the most what the fuck moment on the entire record. I could not have predicted this if you gave me all the time in the world and put a gun to my fucking head. This is Avenged Sevenfold going into zesty, spicy, dare I say, sexy territory with a detour into funk-laced prog rock and prog metal. further garnished by some Iggy Pop-esque spoken word ramblings and some very sensual feminine backing vocals. This whole thing kind of ends up feeling like if Mr. Big and Parliament Funkadelic teamed up to write music for a Sega Genesis game. Following number Ordinary very wisely builds on this momentum by going into full-blown Daft Punk random access memory style funk and pop rock. Some very nice, slick, simplistic bass licks and guitar grooves all throughout. Some nice string arrangements, some nice synthesizers. And then there's Death, which straight the fuck up sounds like if Frank Sinatra was in charge of writing the theme for the next James Bond movie. Straight the fuck up. Fun fact, this trio of tracks we've just talked about, G, Ordinary, Death, spelling out God, apparently was inspired by Sicko Mode from Travis Scott and Drake. What the fuck? Beautiful Morning is a bit of a dud in my opinion. It has some very forgettable ham-fisted riffage in the very beginning, and while I don't want to say that it is totally aimless and directionless, it certainly does feel that way. It's like the sonic equivalent to Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Yes, we're going to all these cool, weird, bizarre alien places, but it just kind of feels like also that nothing is fucking happening. And I don't care what anyone says, I still think the two promo singles, Nobody and We Love You, fucking suck. I will concede Nobody has grown on me a bit. I will concede that it actually has a pretty fantastic guitar solo, but the guitar tone and that main riff, horrible. Also, a little too reminiscent of the Prowler's theme from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's also just generally a somewhat lethargic number that goes on for a bit too long, and don't even get me started on that incredibly repetitive hi-hat cymbal. Oh my goodness! And We Love You is just straight up goofy. Everything about it, from the pounding, Ministry-esque industrial riffage and percussion, to the incredibly repetitive lyricism and chanting, to the totally random foray into like crossover thrash, to the even more random foray into almost like mid-60s Beggar's Banquet Rolling Stones-esque country rock and folk stuff. It's just weird. I've got mixed feelings on the album's production and mixing and mastering. I like the wide open feel to it and how it makes so much room for all of these other instruments and influences, but it can also simultaneously feel somewhat empty and rigid. Also, let's address the elephant in the room, M. Shadows' vocals. Yikes. I mean, he's not so bad when he's sticking to the lower registers, you know, doing some of the punky, thrashy shouting, the spoken word vocals, you know, some mid-range singing and crooning, that's fine. But the moment we start getting into, like, high-pitched screaming or squealing, like falsetto vocals, belting, anything like that, I find myself wincing and cringing like a motherfucker. And yes, before somebody says it, I am well aware that M. Shadows has inflamed vocal cords. I am well aware he almost had to have surgery a couple of years ago. I am well aware that because of this, the quality and the range of his voice will not be at the same level now that it was 15, 20 years ago. If you could remind M. Shadows instead of me, that'd be great. Please and thank you. Right now, I'm feeling a solid 3 out of 5. If the vocals and the production were stronger, and if overall the album was just a little bit more consistent and cohesive, and if things were trimmed a little bit here and there, and if some songs were outright removed, like Nobody and We Love You, I honestly, in that instance, might be feeling a 3.5 out of 5, maybe even a 4, because there are some really strong fucking moments here. My personal recommendation, ignore the fact that this is an Avenged Sevenfold record and just try to enjoy and accept the record for what it is. Go in with as open a mind as possible. Once again, a reasonably solid 3 out of 5. It's a bit of a mess, but it surprisingly works despite that, and I would weirdly recommend it. Just, you know, maybe skip past a few songs and sections and vocal dynamics here and there. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.